Well, as Dale said, we're going to talk about I love giving money. And we're in the season of giving, but also, if you watch enough television, we're in the season of getting, aren't we? So I went on YouTube the other day and I watched a bunch of, I'm intrigued by commercials at Christmas, particularly for luxury cars. They have really, really appealing commercials. They have some fake snow, you know what I mean, and everybody looks so happy. So we're going to watch a couple of commercials this morning that I think will maybe exhibit some contrast in whether we love getting or whether we love giving. You've already had a sneak preview of one. I don't go to many movies, but there used to be sneak previews. So you've had a sneak preview this morning. So I want you to watch, and I want you to see, does this commercial reflect more a spirit of giving or getting? Just watch for a second. What do you think? Getting or giving? Well, there's a little giving in there, but there's more a sense of, I'm going to get what I want, isn't there? There didn't seem to be any options there, did there? I like this one. Now, maybe that's how it is where you live. I don't know. But I want you to go back with me a long way back to Paul's letters to the Christians in Corinth as he talks about loving giving. And he talks about it to an unusual group of people, to a group of people who are among the more prosperous of the early Christians, who live in a very prosperous town, who probably have greater means than most of the other early Christians. And he's asking them to respond to the need of others. So here we have 2 Corinthians chapter 8, okay? And we'll see what's going on here. And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Macedonia was a different part of what we now call Greece. It was a part that had been stricken by really tough times. So let's see what he says. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. I want you to notice that. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their own ability, entirely on their own. And they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord. So we urged Titus, just as we had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to completion this act of grace on your part. But since you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love we have kindled in you, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. What he wants to tell them is, look, there is a group of people who are like you, except their circumstances are much, much different. They live in a time of extreme duress, financial hardship. And guess what? When they heard of other Christians who had need, they gave because of something important. Because, first of all, they had given their lives to God. Listen to the phrases he uses. They were under severe affliction, extreme poverty, and they found abundant joy. You see, it's joy. If you read much about the motivation of giving, it's joy that helps us give, but it's giving that brings us joy. I want to tell you a story I read this summer about a couple of people who learned to love giving money. They were senior adults. They had scrimped and saved. They had been good stewards of what they had. And they looked out for ways they could love giving money. They live in Franklin, Tennessee, outside of Nashville. And they go to a church there. And their pastor is the one who related this story. They were always on the lookout for ways they could help others. And they were in a financial small group at their church where they were learning how to use their finances in a Christ-like way. And there was a young couple in the class, and one day they ran into each other at lunch at a diner. How are you doing? We're doing fine. They knew each other only from the class. How are you doing with the financial class? We're doing okay. We're paying down our debt so we can fulfill a dream. Well, how much debt did you have? The older couple said. Well, we had $60,000 in debt a couple of years ago, student loans, things like that. And we've got it paid down to $10,000. Really? Yeah. What would you do? What would you do when you get it all paid off? What are you going to do? Well, they had thought about a trampoline. And they almost said trampoline. But then they said what was their heart's desire. They said, well, you know what we'd do? If we got our debt paid down, we feel like God would want us to adopt another child. That's what we feel like we'd do. Well, it's good to see you. We'll see you at church. That night they got an email from the couple. Could we come by your house tomorrow? They looked at each other and they said, we're about to be involved in a pyramid scheme. Anybody else ever been given that opportunity? We'd like to come by and talk with you about your finances. Well, reluctantly, hesitantly, they responded, come on by. The older couple walked in and they said, good to see you. Could you tell us how to spell your name? Sure. And the gentleman pulled out a checkbook. And he wrote a check for $10,000. And they said, here's the conditions. Don't tell anybody. Except our pastor. It's okay to tell him. Don't tell anybody. And don't act weird toward us at church. The older couple left. The young couple screamed and shouted and ran around in the winter backyard for 10 or 15 minutes. Overcome by what they had just experienced. They set in motion the process of adoption. And sometime later, they were given a gift, a little girl they called Mela. And on the day Mela was born, they looked back at their journals and they realized the check for $10,000 had been written exactly 9 months before Mela was born. And they began to try to figure out what was going on. And they finally arrived at this conclusion that God had a child out there for them. And this elderly couple was listening to the voice of God because they truly loved to give. God was, in some mysterious way we don't imagine, weaving their journeys together to change the life of a yet-to-be-born baby I don't know about you, but that kind of story kind of gives me chills. What could happen in the lives of others if I chose to love giving? Here at First Baptist, that means that you're a part of providing healing physically, mentally, spiritually. It means you're a part of missions far from here and right down the street. It means that you just don't know all the things you're doing. Now I want you to watch another commercial. And this one has a totally different slant on getting a new car. Just watch. Now, if you're in insurance, this is not an advertisement for somebody else. All right? We just couldn't figure out how to cut that out. But you get the point? You get the point? You know that story, don't you? It may not be a car. You may have delayed doing something for yourself so somebody you could love could fulfill their dream, maybe going to school. We had a man here in our church, John Poteet. A lot of you knew him. He's been gone a long time. John made a lot of money in his life, but he started out dirt poor. He started out at Eastman selling ice creams on the street. He cost him 3 cents to make an ice cream cone. He sold it for a nickel. He made 2 cents on every one. And he saved money, and he saved money, and he saved money. And he ended up part of a bank and part of an oil company. But he didn't delight in anything so much as he did in giving. And he loved to give to educational institutions, Christian charitable institutions. And he loved to see young people's lives changed. And one day I said, John, why? We were looking through his scrapbook at all the things he had done. And I said, John, why? Why did you do this? What compelled you to be so charitable in your life? And he told me a part of the story I'd never heard. He went to medical school in Memphis, but he only had enough money for one semester. And he came back, and he began selling ice creams outside Eastman. And he said, because, Marvin, I want other young people to fulfill their dreams. It's the joy of giving, isn't it? I read a quote the other day that I absolutely love. A man asked, why do you give to your church? And this is what he said: I give away money I don't have for people I don't know, for a God I love very much. Isn't that powerful? I want you to hear that again. I give away money I don't have for people I don't know, for a God I love very much. When it gets right down to it, Paul tells them, you're able to give because you first give yourself to the Lord. And that's how you love giving. Let's pray.